Welcome to this special Fuel for Truth webinar in partnership with the Israel Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center. My name is Justin Ellis, Executive Director of Fuel for Truth. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit group that focuses on equipping individuals with the knowledge, the tools, and the confidence to have civil and productive conversations about Israel, about facets of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and most uniquely, in the world in which we're living today, when terms like alternative facts and post-truth are part of our zeitgeist and our vocabulary, how do you facilitate these conversations effectively, productively, persuasively with those whose understanding of reality is not the same as your own? We do this primarily through a multi-week boot camp program that is designed for young professionals, but we also offer different workshops for communities across the country. And this is really part of who we are and what we are contributing to the Israel education and Jewish empowerment landscape. As part of our webinar today, I'm really happy to have different organizations partner with us who share that vision, who share that passion and commitment, such as the IICC, Jewish National Fund, American Friends of Israel Navy SEALs, Israel Bonds, and Volunteers for Israel. All these organizations are essential to the communal work that we are doing to support the land and people of Israel and the Jewish people as a whole. So I want to thank them not only for their time today, but certainly for every moment that they are furthering this goal and our collective future together. Before we actually begin and introduce General Yosef Kuperwasser, as well as Fuel for Truth Chairman Ron Wasserman, that will be facilitating this webinar, I'd like to introduce Igal Zaidenstein, who is the IICC representative here in the United States, who can tell you more about this amazing organization and what they are doing. And we will then be watching a very brief video about the organization and their role. Igal, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon in the East Coast. My name is Igal Zaidenstein, and I am the representative of the Israel Intelligence, Heritage, and Commemoration Center. Thank you for participating at this webinar. The IICC was established 35 years ago in Israel. That one of the organizations is to educate about the heritage, the history of the Israeli intelligence, which includes the Mossad, the Shin Bet, and the Israeli intelligence of the IDF. And we educate by sharing the stories of the Israeli intelligence, like how the Mossad helped to bring the Jews from Ethiopia, from Russia, from Morocco, for example, how they caught the Eichmann, and many, many other stories. Of course, the stories that we can tell. And we have educational programs, and now we want to bring more missions from the United States to Israel to educate them and to visit our center. It's in Herzliya. We also support the orphans and widows of the Israeli intelligence community. For example, Nadia Cohen and the brother of Ellie Cohen are very involved with us. And we have research center fighting anti-Semitism and the BDS and terrorism. And Mr. and General Kuperwasser is the head of this research center. And now we are in the process of establishing American Friends Organization in the United States to host events in America, in many places we can. And if everyone has questions, I will send my information and want to be involved, please contact me. And thank you for participating.
Thank you, Igal. Before I introduce our panelists for the webinar, we are going to watch a quick video about the IICC so you can really see behind the scenes what they're doing and the impact that they are having.
For more than 6 decades, the state of Israel has been facing constant threats from the Arab world in general and terrorist organizations in particular. These threats create a complex reality that transforms a normal routine into a daily challenge. Three main intelligence organizations were established to provide solutions to the security agenda alongside with Israel Defense Forces routine activity. IDI, Israel Defense Intelligence within IDF, entrusted with collecting and analyzing strategic and tactical intelligence and responsible for the national assessment. Israel's security agency, Shin Bet, responsible for foiling terror activities and preventing internal insurgency. Israel's Secret Intelligence Service, the Mossad, entrusted with collecting information, analyzing intelligence, performing special covert operations beyond Israel's borders, including foiling strategic weapons proliferation and terror, and conducting special Aliyah operations. Motivated by the desire to preserve history and tell the story of Israel's intelligence community, the Israel Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center was inaugurated in 1985. The project was founded together with the intelligence community's bereaved families, led by Major General Meir Amit, former head of IDF Intelligence and director of the Mossad, currently president of IICC. This national commemoration body operates as a non-profit organization. IICC's main goals are to commemorate the fallen members of the Israeli intelligence community, including holding personal memorial ceremonies for the bereaved families and friends. To preserve, document, and pass on the intelligence heritage and legacy to the general public, especially to the young generation. To provide a home for the bereaved families as well as for the community veterans. Furthermore, the ICC took upon itself to play an active role of helping Israel's current security situation. At the heart of this activity operates the ITIC, Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center, founded in 2001. ITIC stands at the forefront of analysis and research of Palestinian terrorism, Hezbollah, global jihad, and other terrorist organizations and activities, employing a small team of highly experienced scholars and data professionals, mostly former members of the intelligence community. ITIC operates three focal elements: a website with more than hundreds of thousands of global hits a month and information bulletins in 6 languages, Hebrew, English, Russian, French, German, and Arabic. The website posts reliable and updated analysis and studies. The center also distributes an electronic newsletter to 7,000 regular subscribers. Among the site's subscribers are functionaries within the White House, number 10 Downing Street, the Kremlin, royalties in Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, and other strategic and decision makers all over the world. The ITIC also offers a computerized library, a unique collection of its kind in the world, containing around 30,000 books in different languages and thousands of scanned articles, along with movies, discs, and documents apprehended during Israel's wars. Seized Palestinian items display. The exhibits display authentic documents and propaganda material, encouraging incitement, hatred, and anti-Semitic education, as well as DIY and standard weaponry being used by the Palestinians and the terror organizations today. These three elements work in cooperation to provide a reliable and extensive network of content based on professional research and expert analysis. With this spirit, it has become an important supporting link to Israel's Foreign Office and its many embassies around the world.
The IICC, the center, is changing course. Up till very recently, we were a closed shop. We were introvert. We met within ourselves. We enjoyed talking to ourselves, between ourselves. And now we're going public. Why? Because we have a story to tell. We have a heritage, a rich heritage, second to none, unique in the annals of intelligence of the world. And hopefully, if we can get our message out to the world, it'll be a better world, a wiser world, maybe a safer world, certainly a happier world. And we hope that you will help us in this endeavor, that you will help us bring our dream come true.
IICC staff is working hard to expand services and create more training and display modules. Developing this crucial memorial, heritage, legacy, and education is sacred work that will never be complete. By combining education with the values of a common legacy, the IICC is committed to working for the community's future. We have come a long way, and yet a lot of work is still to be done. We invite you to become part of this important enterprise for the benefit of all of us. Together, we can be sure the past is not forgotten, so that the present can promise us all a brighter future. The Israel Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center, preserving the legacy for the future.
So thank you for Igal for sharing us that video, and I think people now have a better understanding of the IICC, the role it plays, and certainly the emphasis of why it's so important as part of our past as well as our future. I'm really excited today that we have someone who can really expand upon that, both the past, the present, and what we maybe see going forward. The former head of IDF military intelligence, very involved in research and methodology when it comes to intelligence, General Yosef Kuperwasser, as well as Fuel for Truth Chairman Ron Wasserman. I would like to invite you guys to begin the conversation to talk about the history of intelligence, certainly Yossi's experience in particular, and how obviously this is all manifesting today within the IICC's work.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone, for zooming in with us today. I've been looking forward to this for a while, General, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue here. For the sake of time, I'm going to get right into it. And where I'd like to begin is at the very beginning. If you could just take a minute, General, and tell us about your DNA. Essentially, I'm assuming you were born in Israel. Were your parents born in Israel? Remnants of the Holocaust? Did they come from Arab lands? If you could just take a few minutes to maybe give us a brief history of the Kuperwasser family. We'd like to hear, where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? How did Yossi end up in the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people?
First of all, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Justin, for having us here on this occasion. It's a really very good opportunity to share the story of the intelligence in Israel and to speak about the situation right now. Coming to my personal story, well, I'm second generation to parents who were in the Holocaust for the entire period of the Holocaust. They suffered quite a lot. And when I was young, I was born in Israel. They got married. They came to Israel in 46. My father came in 46. My mother came in 47. They got married in a kibbutz. And to understand the story of Israel, and my story is that when my father got married at the wedding, the only thing he had to wear was a jacket that he took when he ran away from the death march in 45. He found some jacket in a deserted hut in a forest in Germany. And he took this jacket with him to make him warm because it was freezing. And this was the only jacket he had to wear when he got married to my mother. That's where we started. But thereafter they left the kibbutz. I was born in Haifa in Israel in 1953. Just another story that may explain where we stand. When my older sister was born in 49, my father told me that he was contemplating not to have circumcision so that nobody will know that if it's a boy, there's not going to be a circumcision, so that nobody will know that this boy is Jewish. That's the state of mind of that was his state of mind at the time. In 53, I was circumcised. But this is a story. My mother, for example, every lunch, I got a dose of explanations of how the Holocaust was all about and how she managed to keep her brother alive, washing him with snow just to make sure that he's kept clean. That's the kind of stories I was growing up with. No wonder I joined the army and became totally committed to fighting for the security and the survival of the state of Israel. By the way, talking about origins from Arab lands, my wife, she's the daughter of parents that came from Iraq back in the 50s, in the early 50s. So my children, they have no idea if they are Ashkenazi or Mizrahi, Sephardi, they don't have any identity of that anymore. And I think this is the melting pot we were living in Israel. I met her in the intelligence. She's a colonel in the intelligence, so it tells you that the story goes both ways. Anyhow, I studied, when I was young, I had a dream of bringing peace and making a contribution to creating better relations with our Arab neighbors, which at the time we were in a very difficult relationship with our neighbors. And I thought that because of that, it's going to be a good idea if I studied Arabic. So I volunteered to take an early class on Arabic when I was about 12. And I didn't do well. I didn't do well with this Arabic class. So, and everything else, I was very good pupil. So I said, no, well, come, I have to study more about Arabic and become an expert on Arabic. And that's how I started learning more about the people living around us. And that was, of course, the way that led me to the intelligence. Because when I grew up, joined the military, they immediately wanted me to join the intelligence. But before they did that, I joined what we call like ROTC that you have in the States. So I studied Arabic and economics in the university before I joined the military. And everybody any one of us had to go to the infantry before we went to whatever direction we went. So I was an infantry soldier in the 73 war. And later on, because there was a very big shortage of artillery officers, so they said, forget about the intelligence, we'll send you to be an artillery officer. So I became an artillery officer. And only later on, somebody had the revelation and said, but he knows Arabic. He has the capabilities to be an intelligence officer. So let's send him to the intelligence. And that actually happened, that I went to the intelligence and I did a very interesting career in the intelligence. I was in charge of the research activities of the intelligence on all levels until I became the intelligence officer of Central Command in Israel, which is responsible for the Palestinian and the Eastern Front. And later on, the director of the Research and Analysis Division of the Intelligence, which is in many cases the highest professional position in the Israeli intelligence that you can reach. The higher ranks are going to people who come from the field, not necessarily from with intelligence experience. That's what I did. Later on, I left the military. I was sometime the advisor for strategic issues and security issues for the government of Colombia in a very interesting period after I left the military. And then I rejoined the Israeli government as the Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and International Cooperation. And thereafter, I joined the IICC, as you call it, IICC, and I formed a research center that deals with the methodology of intelligence. And just recently, I became also the head of the center we have for counterterrorism or terrorism and intelligence affairs that deals more with the content of intelligence, not with the methodology. I established this center 20 years ago, and now that the head of the center passed away, and it was terrible, I volunteered to take over for at least a while. So now I'm holding two positions in the IICC.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about your military career, but you kind of went in that. So we can start to dive deep into the topic of today, which is intelligence. I've always been fascinated with Israeli intelligence. Behind me, I've read almost every book translated into English about the Mossad. There might be a few out there that I'm not aware of or haven't found. And I always love, not that we're going to talk about it today, but the human intelligence aspect, being that during the British Mandate of Palestine, the British had a problem. They needed to penetrate behind enemy lines for a number of different reasons, weren't having success. And it took them until 1943, 44 to realize that within their mandate for Palestine, they had representation from every European country. You needed Hungarian, Romanian, Polish, Russian, you name it, it was there. They could speak the language. They knew the cities, they knew people. And they started to deploy the likes of Hannah Senes, the Sheikh Dan, who, the ones who were able to survive their missions, career officers. There are many different ways to collect intelligence. You have, open source, signal, human. For our discussion today, can you talk to us? Let's focus on signal intelligence, human intelligence. How are these strengths for Israel? How do they come into play to protect the Jewish state and deal with some of the threats that are facing Israel today?
So, well, in order to really have a picture of the things that you need to know and to realize what are the things that you need to know, you got to have all kinds of intelligence. You cannot excel only in one part of it. And if you are able to really master all the phases of intelligence, then you might reach what we call intelligence dominance, which is knowing what you need to know at the time you need to know it, because it's, sometimes you know things, but it's too late. So we have to develop the capability to know what we need to know on time. And one of the major things that we do for that is improve our SIGINT intelligence, which by nature gives you intelligence on time. If you listen to what some people say, or you follow the electronic activity of some radar, you know on time exactly what's going on. And if you are able to digest it rapidly, then you are able to make good of this information on time. But this by itself is not enough. In order to be capable to really do the best out of this signal intelligence, you need to know human intelligence. You need to have some spies in all kinds of places because always when you get some signal intelligence, you don't always, most of the time, it's somebody who's trying to convince somebody of something or tell somebody something that is not necessarily really what he thinks. So you need the human intelligence to give you the complete picture that will make you able to say, what does he actually mean when he says what he says? You have to meet these two together. And this too is not enough, because sometimes you want to see it by your own eyes to be able to say, this is this, and it's not something else. And this is, in many of the things we do, we are very deeply relying on the visual intelligence that we also developed in a very significant way. And we have, as you know, satellites, intelligence satellites flying over the world to collect the information we need. And you put these three together, and this still is not enough, because today, if you don't have what we call open source intelligence and social networks intelligence, and you are able to rely on the knowledge of the public for that purpose, because there's so much intelligence, so much information over there, you want to put all of this together and make sure that you fuse all of them in order to have the real picture. Now, while doing so, you have to cope with growing challenges, because the enemy also knows that we are listening, that we are following, that we are looking, and so on and so forth. So the enemy develops all kinds of ways to protect itself. And if we want to be capable to overcome and win this ongoing learning competition, because it is a learning competition, we never underestimate our enemies. They are very competent. If you want to win such a competition, you got to be the best you can get out of yourself. And in this way, the Israeli intelligence was, for example, Unit 8200, as everybody calls 8200, that leads the signal intelligence efforts and much of the cyber activity that now is part of intelligence. With this unit, we have developed the secret of Israel's startup nation success, because much of the activities come from this unit or from other units that deal with technological challenges. And the same with the visual intelligence. We are leading the world with unmanned air vehicles and all kinds of capabilities of face recognition and things like that, that are things that we are very much at the forefront of every effort in the world to improve. And with cyber as well, you know, the cyber security, which is something that we are excelling in, is a lesson of what we did in cyber offensive operations. So that's how you learn how to protect. And so it's all the contribution of the intelligence is not only directly to the security while providing the intelligence you need in order to carry out operations, and to defend yourself, but also in contributing to the success of Israel as a leading economy in technology and so on. And the technologies we develop are not necessarily only for security. We develop a lot of technologies for security, but not only. Also, for example, for health purposes and agriculture and other things. But many of the ideas are coming from the intelligence of people that were in the intelligence and learned all kinds of tricks and ideas while they were in the intelligence.
General, Israel recently now has, you talked about you wanted to join the army to bring peace. And on that thread, there has been new peace in your region with the Abraham Accords in the Sunni Gulf states, Morocco. Can you talk to us now about intelligence when it comes to the Abraham Accords? Specifically, I would imagine there are pros and cons. There are probably intelligence advantages that will arise as a result of these deals. And also there must be risks and danger that may be associated with it. One thing that I think of and I've talked about in my circles is, you know, Israel's now going to be dealing with, you know, Arabs coming in from the Sunni states, which they've never had to deal with before. You know, they never had to worry about travel from these places. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, some of the advantages and disadvantages that are going to come along with Israel's new peace?
Well, I think the advantages are much bigger than the disadvantages and the challenges. First of all, the role of intelligence was to say that there is an opportunity here to go this way. And I can tell you that as an intelligence expert and somebody who dealt with it, I was pointing at this opportunity for a long while now. It's not something that is surprising. And it didn't happen until now because people were a little bit stuck in some sort of box that it was very difficult to get out of. And I'm sure all of you saw the box when former Secretary of State Kerry said, no, this cannot happen. And I at the same time, even before that, I was saying, yes, this can happen. And these people are right to establish normal relations with Israel, and we should go in this direction. It's a lot of opportunities are lying over there. So this was the first task of the intelligence to say that there is an opportunity to make sure that we make an effort to take advantage of this opportunity. Now, once it happened, the benefits, I think the first benefit is that I'll say about the strategic level. I mean, strategically speaking, the Middle East is divided into two major groups, the pragmatists and the radicals, okay? And they fight each other. We are just a marginal issue. We and the Palestinian issue is a marginal issue for the big battle between pragmatism and radicalism inside the Middle East and inside Islam. And the pragmatists need friends. And the fact that they now can openly speak and openly communicate and openly rely on a strong friend that's going to help them in facing the threats coming from the radicals, this is the major benefit of this Abrahamic Accords. Because until now, they were pretty weak. For a long while, they were losing. And I think that in recent years, with the better relations with Israel, they saw that Israel is the strong horse that they can rely on. Israel is not shy from facing the radicals. Israel takes action against the radicals. Israel is attacking Iranian targets in Syria. It's, nobody else dares to take any action against the Iranians. This is a force you can rely on, and with it, you feel more secure. And for us, it's extremely important to make sure that the pragmatists for the Middle East remain strong enough to face this threat coming from the radicals, regardless of which radicals we're talking about. There are many kinds of radicals. So this is the major achievement. The second achievement is that, you know, we have a dream in Israel of integrating into the Middle East. Now you say, why would you like to integrate yourself with people that are not always the nicest? But there are, many of them are nice, and you just have to reach them and to find out how nice they are. And here it gave us an opportunity. Those Abraham Accord gave us an opportunity to see the nice side of the Arab world. If you look at what's happening today between us and the people in the UAE, what may happen between us and the people of Morocco, what can happen between us and the people of Bahrain, and already is happening. As somebody who's, I had the pleasure of hosting here a delegation from Bahrain and the UAE. It was really thrilling and wonderful. And already 130,000 Israelis already visited the UAE. For the first time, we have a really warm peace, a people-to-people peace, not just government to government. It's something that improves very much the feeling of Israelis. They feel, okay, the pressure is a little bit off. And you have to remember that Israelis live in a continuous pressure. At every given moment, a rocket from Gaza can hit Tel Aviv, okay? Hezbollah has 130,000 rockets directed and pointed at Israeli targets. It's, you feel under threat all the time. It's all of a sudden you have somebody from the region, legitimate and hopefully stronger friend of Israel. That's something very important. And the third thing, the third benefit is that it gives some ray of hope regarding the Palestinian issue, because we cannot solve the conflict with the Palestinians in the current conditions. It's a dead end. The Palestinians insist that Israel should disappear, and we don't want to take unreasonable risks upon ourselves and to evacuate all kinds of places. We saw what happened to us when we left Gaza. So it's very difficult to overcome the differences of views between us and the Palestinians. For anything to change, the Palestinian narrative has to change. And one of the reasons the Palestinians were never ready to change the narrative, because they thought that the Arabs are there for them and there is no reason to make any concessions and to change their position. So they're always saying, if you want to have any sort of agreement with us, you have to accept our conditions. Otherwise, you're not going to have normal relations, and you're not going to be integrated into the region. So now we are integrating into the region, and this will hopefully signal to the Palestinians that they have to make, finally, after so many years, after 100 years, they have to make a move to change a little bit their position. So, and this, if this is going to happen, maybe we shall have an opportunity to make peace with the Palestinians as well, which is something that is, of course, for Israelis extremely important.
You know what?
Now, coming back to your threats,
yeah,
we did hold, by the way, in our institute meeting with the different agencies to discuss the threats and the challenges. And yeah, we shall have to make sure that nobody with malintentions take advantage of the fact that we open our gates to Arab citizens and try to take to advantage of that in order to carry out a terror attack or something like that. But to tell you the truth, we have so many Arabs living inside Israel, so many Palestinians living around us. If they wanted to carry out terror attacks, some of them try, and we have to thwart it. And some of them try and they succeed. And many of them don't even try. So we have to, we are living in this reality all the time. And our deterrence and our intelligence capabilities provide us with the security we need on a permanent basis.
So I want to get into the Palestinian issue, and certainly the elephant in the room, which would be Iran. Since you started on the Palestinian track, I want to share with everyone quickly, you wrote a rebuttal to Jeffrey Goldberg's article after the JCPOA. I think he was thrashing, Israel and Netanyahu. I just want to read the 3 or 4 sentences very quickly for the audience, and then I want to ask you about it. From Yosef Kuperwasser. In short, even though Israel, under Prime Minister Netanyahu, remains committed to the formula of 2 states for 2 peoples with mutual recognition, the implementation of this idea at this point is irrelevant. The PA's poor governance and the general turmoil in the Middle East render any establishment of a Palestinian state right now unviable. President Obama admitted as much, reluctantly, but continued to criticize Netanyahu instead of betraying his optimist paradigm. Netanyahu's realism would stray too far from the path Obama and other Western leaders have set in front of them. But while Obama and the optimists offer their critiques, Netanyahu and the realists will be on the ground, living with the consequences the optimists have wrought. I've been saying for years, while I would love the Palestinians to have their own state, if I hated them at this point in time, I think the worst thing you could do to them is give them their own state, give Abu Mazen and Fatah and whoever's going to come after him more control for more corruption and more brutality. You had a front seat on this issue. I'm sure you have had access to all kinds of intelligence. If you could just talk to us about, to be specific, what advice would you have for the American administration in trying to deal with this issue? And what would your advice for, I know we're going to have a new government very soon, but give advice for our audience here on how to handle it from an Israeli perspective.
Yeah, well, the problem was the peace process, and I think I wrote it in this piece as well, but I don't remember, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, is that the Palestinians have a certain narrative that makes the chances of having a peaceful state living next to us very slim at this point, as long as they stick to this narrative. This narrative says that there is no such thing as a Jewish people. Jews are just a religion, and because of that, they don't have a right for self-determination. Secondly, it says that the Jews did not have any sovereign history in the land of Israel / Palestine. And because of that, even if the Jews were a people, they shouldn't have a state here, find somewhere else, not here. And if there was a Jewish state, maybe there was one in Yemen. Thirdly, they say that the Jews are terrible creatures, and this is why everybody wants to get rid of them. And there's no reason why the Palestinians, have to suffer the presence of the Jews next to them because they're so terrible. It's a very anti-Semitic approach. And fourth, they say, because of all of that, our purpose in life is to struggle against Zionism and to make sure that Zionism doesn't have the chance to have a state for the Jewish people in the land of Israel / Palestine. It doesn't matter how big it is, even if it's on 1 grain of soil. And that's what they believe in. And that's why they refuse to finish the story of the refugees, because the refugees have to come back. This is the victimhood that feeds their animosity towards the Jews. And they refuse to accept Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. Some of them are ready to accept that there is something called Israel, but it's not an ethnic entity that is the nation state of the Jewish people, but it's just a regular state of all of its citizens, which means that Israel is not the nation state of the Jewish people. That's, and even that they say only on a temporary basis. If you follow the incitement, the hate indoctrination that goes on in the Palestinian textbooks, in the Palestinian sermons on mosques and so on and so forth, you find that there's no effort to prepare the minds of the people to any kind of real peace with the Jews living in Israel. So as long as this is the narrative of the Palestinians, and I forgot one other element in this narrative, the lesson learned from all these elements in the narrative is that the purpose of the Palestinians is to struggle against Zionism when all the ways of struggle are legitimate, including, of course, writing poems that are supporting the struggle, but also terrorism and violence. And the question of what kind of tools you use at a specific given time is derived from a calculation of cost benefit. Is it good for us or is it not good for us in promoting our goal? So there's a debate between for example, there used to be a debate between the Fatah and the Hamas of whether they should militarize the struggle and use explosives and firearms in order to promote it, as Hamas was thinking for a long time, or should they only stick to what they call popular resistance, which is struggling, including with terror, but without firearms and explosives, like stabbing, ramming with cars and things like that. Of course, Molotov cocktails and throwing stones, and which is the position taken by the Fatah. Now the Hamas has joined Fatah. Even the Hamas says, okay, we'll go for the popular resistance, as they call it, popular struggle. And that's where the Palestinians are. If you ask me what should be done about it, is to try to convince them to change this policy. One of the major elements of this policy that reflects this ideology is the idea of pay for slave, right? They pay huge salaries to every Palestinian who's serving time in Israeli jails for committing terror attacks. So, and the higher the salary, the longer the time they serve in jails, the higher the salary they get. So somebody has to put an end to that. This is not contributing in any way to having peace between us, right? It's on top of the incitement in the textbooks. So it's, the United States has adopted a law called the Taylor Force Act. That says that the United States is not going to give money to the Palestinian Authority as long as this goes on, as long as the Palestinians keep paying salaries to terrorists. But what we hear today is that the United States is trying to find ways to resume the aid to the Palestinians. Have the Palestinians stopped paying salaries to terrorists? No, the Palestinians are saying, even if we have only 1 penny, we should use it in order to pay salaries to terrorists. So something has to be done about this narrative. That's what I would advise the new administration. That's what they should do. Put pressure on the Palestinians to change their narrative. And the best way to do that is not to give them money while they keep paying salaries to terrorists, not to give them money while they're fighting against us. Another way of struggle is the legal struggle. They file complaints against us, and they also support filing complaints against the United States in the International Criminal Court. Instead of giving them money while they do all of that, what should be done is invest more in the Abraham Accords. Make sure that more Arab countries join the Abraham Accords to make the message clear to the Palestinians that if they rely on the Arabs to put pressure on Israel, the opposite is happening. And if they want to improve the situation, what they have to do is to change the narrative and accept the idea of 2 states for 2 peoples with mutual recognition, as you mentioned me writing in this rebuttal. So mutual recognition, this is the most important issue, that they will recognize that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. Once they do that, this is going to be the big change in the way Palestinians think about the conflict. It's not about throwing the Zionists away from Israel. This is not going to happen. You think about it. Think about the Palestinian refugees and their descendants, who some of them are still living in poor conditions in all kinds of places, including in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority itself. And the Palestinians refuse to solve their problem because they prepare them to come back to Jaffa. You know, in Nablus, there's a refugee camp called Balata. It's one of the biggest refugee camps in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And in the Balata refugee camp, there is a big house called the Jaffa Center. And the people there from Balata prepare themselves to go back to Jaffa. We are 72 years after the creation of the establishment of the State of Israel. They left, some of them because we were expelled. Most of them left because they believed that they are going to come back after Israel is going to disappear after 7 armies attacked us. And they got stuck wherever they got stuck. It's time to solve their problem. How long these people can live like that? And it's crazy. The Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian leadership doesn't care. They want to make sure that this is eternalized. because it's not going to be solved by them coming back to Jaffa. They're not coming back to Jaffa. Everybody understands that. So once they lose the Arab support, maybe they will start thinking it over. One thing has already happened. They think again about terrorism. I mean, they still support it. They still pay for slaves. They do all of that. And some of them still carry out terror attacks. But in general, I would say that the Palestinians today think differently about the benefits of terrorism. In the past, in the days of Yasser Arafat, the benefits were very clear. Even with our evacuation of Gaza, disengagement from Gaza in 2006, they could have said, okay, we got it because we were carrying out terror attacks. But since 2006, they got nothing. And so they realized they don't want to go back to a third intifada. That's why there was no third intifada. It's not the situation on the ground has changed dramatically. But they realized that terrorism is not going to pay off. And that's, or more of them do, not everybody, of course. And so that tells you that they can learn. There is some sort of a learning process inside the Palestinian community. That's one thing. Look at what's happening today with the Israeli Arabs. That the joint list was ripped into two pieces, and one of them say, we care more about our living conditions than our future, than getting rid of the Israelis. We want to know what's happening to us tomorrow. That's one thing that is telling us that something can happen. So maybe at one point they will also change the basic narrative. I hope so.
I want to leave time at the end for some questions. And I knew we were never going to get through everything that I wanted to, which is why I'm going to make you promise right here, General, and next time I'm in Israel, you have to accept a cup of coffee from me. And so we can continue this conversation off. Right?
My pleasure.
Let's end with the elephant in the room. Iran. So probably the biggest threat, arguably one of the biggest threats to Israel. We are seeing, according to the Wall Street Journal, ships are being sunk. I know we have the AFIN sponsoring this. I'm sure they're going to plead the fifth on that. But we have ships sinking in the Persian Gulf. We have buildings affiliated with the IRGC and the nuclear program exploding and burning down in Iran. We had the killing of the #1 nuclear scientist. We could go on and on. Can you talk to us about, so we see the end game that's been reported. These missions have taken place, thank God, successfully. There's got to be an unbelievable amount of intelligence that goes in and allows these units to execute this stuff. Can you talk to us about Iran? What kind of challenges are ahead of us in collecting intelligence? What kind of, threats are we going to face this year, next year, in the future from the Iranian regime?
So, of course, Iran is the biggest challenge Israel has. And so far, I think Israel has proven that it can enjoy what we call intelligence dominance, what I referred to before as intelligence dominance. We know on time what we need to know. We don't know everything, but the important thing is to know what you need to know on time. Sometimes, even on Iran, we don't know on time everything, but we don't know too late, fortunately. Because if you look at the Iranian nuclear project, basically, judging by the Iranian technological level, they should have had a nuclear weapon long ago. And one of the main reasons why they don't have it is that somebody interferes with their efforts. And it may be some explosions here and there. It can be all kinds of people that get hit from time to time. It can be everybody speaking about the explosions in the cyber efforts that was done some time ago allegedly by Israel or maybe together with the United States. What's called Stuxnet and things like that. A lot of things are happening all the time, and all these things slow down the progress the Iranians are doing towards the nuclear weapon. And one thing Israel is also committed to saying all the time, if the Iranians are going to cross a certain red line, then all these sophisticated activities may move away, and we shall have to take some more kinetic action, direct and open. That's also a possibility, and Israel prepares itself also for this eventuality. It's, in order to be able to do all of that, you have to have access to the information you need through SIGINT, through humans, through all these sources that I mentioned, all these methods that I mentioned. I think that the most amazing thing we did, and we even took responsibility for, is bringing the archives of the nuclear program from Iran to Israel. Now, I knew a lot about the things that were in this archive long ago, even though they were not public, but we knew, and we shared this with the Americans and with others, and this was the base for the entire investigation into what's called Iran's potential military dimensions of the nuclear program, which actually dealt with much of the things that were in this archive. But even for us in Israel, I think, at least for me, and I was deeply involved in that in those days, the archives revealed all kinds of things that we didn't know. And so this was, but this was as an operation, it was really amazing stuff. Now, of course, look, I can give you an example from something that was published, so I can speak about. In 2001, the Iranians helped the Palestinians, together with Hezbollah, to send a ship, relatively big one, called Karin A, that was bought in the Mediterranean Sea and went all the way to Iran and took upon it a lot of weapons for the Palestinians, and was supposed to bring these weapons to Gaza. I was involved in this effort to thwart this attempt. And I can tell you that from all kinds of sources, a piece of information came from that source, a piece of information came from that source. And altogether, when we were able to say that something is cooking, we had like, I don't know, 50 to 100 pieces of the puzzle out of 1,000. This was enough, you know, to say this is what's happening, until we were actually able to say what is the name of this ship, and where is it, and when is it coming to our direction, and even it was extremely difficult to say for sure that there are weapons on that ship. The chief of staff refused to go to this operation in which we went way beyond our known capability, the capabilities we knew we had. We went beyond the capabilities we knew we had. But he refused even to put this to a test. Before I was able to tell him, listen, this is 100%, I guarantee you there are weapons on this ship. And I did it, and I even, after a while, I forgot why I did it. But there was some reason for which I was able to say 100%. And we went to the thwart this ship on its way to Gaza in the Red Sea. That is the kind of things that you have to take some risks, because you never have all the pieces of information available to you on time. That's where the assessment comes in. It's not enough just to have the information. You have to assess the information and to come up with all kinds of conclusions and to make decisions based on the conclusions you made out of this assessment. And that's the way we operate. And we have all kinds of methods that minimize the possibility that we shall make a mistake. And we very seldom make mistakes, but this doesn't mean that we are totally immune to mistakes. From time to time, that also happens, unfortunately. And we have to remember we also have to remember that we are not divine. We can make mistakes, so we have to take the precautions to make sure that we leave very little to a chance. And that's why we have all the time to improve our intelligence, to improve our capabilities, because as I said before, it's the other side. Every such case is immediately analyzed by the other side to find out where was his mistake. How can he improve the way that he is better equipped to prevent us from having another success? And look what's happening in this battle between us and the Iranians. We always, all the time, have new successes that they thought we shall not be able to have. Look, for example, at what's happening in Syria. The way we attack all kinds of Iranian assets in Syria. I mean, they must have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on and to improve themselves to the point where it's going to be difficult for the Israelis to know where these assets are. And yet, every fortnight, or sometimes even more than just once in 2 weeks, we attack a certain asset of the Iranians and prevent them from delivering weapons to Hezbollah, advanced weapons to Hezbollah, and prevent them from turning Syria into a base from which they can threaten Israel. And while we do that, we don't have 100% success. I'm sure that they do also make some progress in their efforts. So it's an ongoing battle in which they are all the time surprised. That's the kind of effort that intelligence needs to carry out in order to have this dominance that I was talking about. You have to improve yourself all the time.
Can we finish before we take calls on the Iranian agreement? Seems that the new administration here in America will be pursuing some sort of deal with the Iranians. You know, I've read a lot about what you wrote about the first JCPOA. Can we end before we take questions on your views of how we should play a strong hand or advice that you may have given the seat that you've sat in when it comes to negotiating a new nuclear deal with the Iranian regime?
Well, I think that the Iran nuclear deal from 2015 was a gift given to the Iranians, because what was the problem of the Iranians, and still is? They want to have some arsenal of nuclear weapons. Now, the road to having this arsenal is going through a certain threshold in which people know that you are trying to achieve nuclear weapons. You still don't have a nuclear weapon. So in this time between your decision to have a nuclear weapon and the time you actually have it, you are totally exposed if somebody knows that this is what you're trying to achieve. And this is the first mission for the intelligence, to know when such a decision is taken. And the JCPOA just made this threshold disappear. According to the JCPOA, there's no threshold, because after year 10, which is 2025, after year 10, the Iranians can already enrich how much uranium they want to 3.67 level, but this first stage of enrichment is about 50% of the enrichment you need in order to reach a military level. And after year 15, in 2030, the threshold disappears completely, because they can enrich as much uranium to any level, including military level. According to the agreement, they are not going to breach any agreement. So they're going to have enough material for having a big arsenal of nuclear weapons, like 100 nuclear weapons, before they decide that they want to really actually use it to develop nuclear weapons. And the threshold will disappear. What kept them away from having a nuclear weapon is the threshold. That's when what they're doing right now, they're caught again with the threshold. Yes, they're making progress. Every day there's a new announcement. Now they're using improved centrifuges, the IR4 and the IR2M, and each step is dangerous and worrying. But still, the threshold is still there. Once they will start enriching uranium for 20%, and they're already enriching uranium for 20%, to an amount that crosses 250 kilograms, something is going to happen. They know that. Israel has already told them that. So they are very cautious not to reach this point. It's a brinkmanship they play with the Americans. All they want to do is to go back to the old agreement that guarantees to them no threshold. You go straight to a big arsenal of nuclear weapons. Yes, it takes a little bit more time maybe, but no threats, no economic hardships, no economic sanctions, no fear of a military attack against you. You are safe. And more than that, since the sanctions are going to be lifted, you will be able to spread your influence and hegemony over the entire Middle East. Great stuff. So this is exactly what the Iranians want. They want to go back to this JCPOA. And the entire game of brinkmanship that they play is just in order to convince the Americans to go there. It's, on the other hand, if the sanctions continue, they are under a lot of pressure. They don't have money. Look what's happening in Iran. It's, people are really suffering, and it affects the regime. Look at what's happening in Balochistan right now when people are getting shot because they're involved in smuggling across the border because they don't have any other way of making a living. It's, look at what's happening in all these countries that during the good days, the Iranians spread their influence in. Look at Lebanon, what a poor situation the Lebanese are suffering from. Look at what's going on in Iraq. People are suffering in Iraq. Look at what's going on in Syria. All the territories, or Yemen. Look at all the territories that the Iranians managed to spread their influence to, how their situation is so fragile and vulnerable. So it's, we got the Iranians in a very difficult situation. Now, of course, the Iranians are very good at playing their cards, and they would never tell you that they suffer. We are doing fine, but they're not doing fine. We know that they're not doing fine. They're doing very poorly. And this is an opportunity to force them to accept a different agreement, an agreement that would really prevent them from having a nuclear weapon in any path they may choose. And what needs to be done in this respect is, first of all, to give up the idea of a sunset. Why in 2030 they are allowed to have a nuclear weapon? It's, or they're allowed to have the infrastructure needed in order to have a nuclear weapon. Of course, the agreement doesn't state that they are allowed to have a nuclear weapon, but they give all the ingredients you need to develop a nuclear weapon without anybody able to interfere with it. So it's, who is going to enable the Iranians to have this? The sunset, the idea of a sunset is strange. What do they need 90% enriched uranium for? Why do you let them have 90% enriched uranium? The only thing you can do is, not the only thing, but the only real thing that the Iranians can do with the 90% enriched uranium is to develop nuclear weapons. That's why let them do that at any given time. And the second thing that needs to change dramatically is the idea of the inspections and the monitoring of the agreement. It's in the JCPOA, there is no monitoring. It's a fiction. There's no monitoring because the monitoring is only in the declared sites. So you can blame the Iranians for many things, but you cannot blame them for being stupid and develop a nuclear weapon in the declared site. And just now we learned that they were lying, that they were hiding all kinds of sites that nobody knew about. Turkuzabad and Abadeh are places that nobody knew that they existed at all. And they were using them in order to, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, just reported that they found anthropogenic particles of uranium in these places. So there were other places, not declared sites, in which the Iranians were developing all kinds of things related to their nuclear weapons. Because how did we learn about these places? From the archives that I mentioned before. So it's, nobody knew about it. So we need to be able to have monitoring anytime, anywhere, and to be able to monitor the scientists. The scientists are the main issue because you can move things from one place to another, but you cannot develop an army of scientists all of a sudden. So the scientists are the most important thing that you have to monitor. In the JCPOA, there's no monitoring of the scientists, not whatsoever. The inspectors were not allowed to speak with any of the scientists, not even to speak with, let alone to monitor. So it's, this is the JCPOA. There is no mentioning of ballistic missiles in the JCPOA. How can you ignore the ballistic missiles? The ballistic missiles are the delivery system of the nuclear weapon. You have to know what's going on with the ballistic missiles. And what's happening right now is that the Iranians are developing ballistic missiles that are threatening Europe, and they plan to develop something that would threaten the United States as well. And that's what they're focusing on. There's a long list of terrible stuff in this JCPOA agreement. Now, in the first years of the JCPOA, that was the message we got from the Americans. In the first years of the JCPOA, the Iranians are giving us all kinds of goodies for the good stuff that they're going to get in the 8 last years of the JCPOA. So let's take advantage of the first years, and then we shall see. Well, okay, the Iranians know this trick too. That's why they were planning to cheat as well. It's, and they are cheating as we speak, and they're breaking and breaching all the commitments they had according to the JCPOA. And we are only at year 5.5. And they are already having all the things that they should have had only at year 8. And, actually at tier 15, things that were supposed to be there at tier 15 are already operating now. So there's no way to go back to the JCPOA because JCPOA says that the development of certain centrifuges and the use of these centrifuges for enriching uranium will start only at year 10, but it's happening now. So what are you going to do about it? There's no way of going back there. And it's very dangerous. And this is, by the way, this is how dangerous it is. It's very easy to learn from the fact that the Iranians want it so much. If it was better to the Iranians to continue with the path and the path they are on now, why are they insisting on going back to the JCPOA? So it's, if it's so good to Iran, it's bad to us. That's a litmus test that you can use very easily. And that's why I think we have the sanctions going. The Iranians are in a very poor shape. It's an opportunity to put pressure on them and force them to accept a different agreement that will really make us confident that they are not able to develop nuclear weapons.
Okay, thank you, General. I think now, Justin, I'll turn it over to you. It looks like we have a bunch of questions. We have about 20 minutes, so probably won't get to all of them, but Yossi, hope you're ready. We'll just go to read off some questions from the audience here for you.
Yeah, and we'll try to keep them as diverse as possible. Certainly, if it was covered in your dialogue, we'll probably pass over them just to make sure they're a little more fresh. One first question we have here is, has there been any progress in having Ellie Cohen's remains returned, whether that's Ellie Cohen, Ron Arad, or other Israeli intelligence assets or IDF soldiers who are either held behind enemy lines or who were killed in the line of duty?
So there's an ongoing effort, as you all following the news know, to return the missing soldiers and Ellie Cohen from Syria and from elsewhere where they are. It's always a top priority for the Israeli intelligence. The world is full with people who are ready to cheat us with and give us all kinds of false information about where Ellie Cohen's bones are, and so on and so forth, and all kinds of information that relates to Ellie Cohen. And they know how eager we are to have new information and to bring him to Israel. Fortunately, in recent years, with the growing presence of Russia in Syria, we were able, and the growing dependency of Assad on the Russians, and the improving relationships that we have with the Russians on security matters, especially in Syria, we had an opportunity to open some of these files and bring to Israel at least the bones of corpse of one of the soldiers we lost and that was buried in Syria. And we still have expectations. I cannot speak of any of the efforts that is going on right now, but I can say that there's ongoing effort because this is, as I said, top priority for Israel to see if something can happen. It's not easy to get information. Many of the people that were involved in that are not with us anymore. And an effort was done, of course, to hide the details that are necessary in order to solve this riddle.
Mm-hmm. You previously broke down the actors of the Middle East into two categories. You described them as the pragmatists and the radicals. One of the questions we have here that I like and would like you to first answer the question, but also explain why you feel this way. Do you consider Saudi Arabia part of the pragmatist or the radical camp?
So Saudi Arabia today, for sure, is amongst the pragmatists, especially under Mohammed bin Salman. This is the direction the Saudis are going. And as a matter of fact, I would say that in recent years, under his leadership, Saudi Arabia has become the leader of the pragmatic camp. In the past, it was Egypt, which is still part of this camp. But today, Saudi Arabia is in the leading position of the camp of the pragmatists. If you follow what MBS is trying to do, is trying to have Saudi Arabia go through a revolution. It's not done yet. It's in the middle. The process has just begun. One of the elements that part of this revolution is changing the attitude towards Israel. It's also something done gradually. We saw it in those Ramadan series in last year Ramadan, with the attitude to Israelis that was in Saudi series. We saw it with the agreement of Saudi Arabia to allow Israeli planes to fly to UAE over Saudi Arabia and fly to the east over Saudi Arabia, which is something that's a major step in our normalization between us and the Saudis. But we also see it in the way he tries to develop changes in the attitude to women and to many other elements of life in Saudi Arabia. He was the closest person until Mohammed bin Zayed came into the picture of expressing readiness to accept Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. If you read you mentioned Jeffrey Goldberg. If you read his MBS interview with Jeffrey Goldberg, he was actually saying yes to this question that was posed to him by Jeffrey Goldberg at the time, and without saying the word yes. But he was actually giving a positive answer to that. So, and this enabled the MBZ in the Abraham Accord to actually use this terminology and express and look at Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, or the Jewish state, which is a major breakthrough, because the Egyptians in the agreements we had with them did not accept that. They made an agreement with Israel without saying what is Israel. MBZ for the first time said what Israel is. And this is a major breakthrough that was not possible without the support of MBS. So it's, we have to understand that, yes, they are not ripe yet to establish open, full diplomatic relations with Israel, but the process is happening under his leadership. And the reason is that they, again, I highly recommend reading this article, this interview with MBS to understand where he stands. What is important for the pragmatists is to make sure that the Arabs and the Muslims of the Middle East will be able to get competent enough to participate in to have a role and to be integrated into the new global village, that they will find opportunities for themselves in this new world once the oil is going to disappear at a certain point. And this is the time that they have to invest in making this preparation of themselves to be able to have a growing economy and impressive present and future in the future, in this future that according to MBS is to start happening in 2030. That's why he has a 10 years plan until 2030, in which he wants to have a revolution in Saudi Arabia. And the threat is that the radicals don't want to see this thing happening. What bothers them is to make sure that Islam is spread all over the Middle East in their version of it. And from there is going to change the entire world, and everybody in the world will become Muslim. That's the radical approach led by Iran on the one hand, Muslim Brothers, and ISIS on the other. These are the real enemies of MBS and the other pragmatists.
I'm sure most of us here are familiar with the expression 2 Jews or 2 Israelis, 3 opinions. When it comes to the IDF military establishment, intelligence officers, I'm sure thinking is not monolithic either. When it comes to views in that community that are alternative to yours, whether it pertains to Iran and the JCPOA or even the Palestinian issue, can you talk about where there's disagreement in your views, and like how do you bridge that gap in those differences in opinion?
Well, basically there are disagreements in Israeli, as you said, the two Jews or 2 Israelis. They don't have to be Jews. The Arabs in Israel have learned from us. They also have many views. On everything, there are many views, and nobody in Israel. I'll tell you a story that will explain that. Okay, when I was the director of the research division, I was presenting all kinds of the opinion of the division to the chief of staff or to the Minister of Defense or to the Prime Minister. And when I finished speaking, sometimes I used to bring with me some of my officers who were responsible for a specific issue that we were discussing. And after I finished speaking, sometimes one of my officers would say, I want to add something or to differ or whatever. And the chief of staff at the time, and that later became the Minister of Defense, was telling me, Cooper, this is my nickname in Israel. Well, you already summarized. Why do you let these people speak after you? And I said, well, the fact that I summarize doesn't mean that this is the truth coming from heaven. It's, you should listen to more views. And the entire enterprise of intelligence in Israel is based on the fact that we have many views. And when we don't have many views, we force somebody to say a different view. We have a devil's advocate that his mission is to say a different view. And everything that the intelligence says and to say, no, they're right, they're wrong. It's, the situation is different, is totally different. And sometimes we ask this guy to write something we call ipcha mistabra. The opposite is true. And to force himself to write something that says that major issues that the opposite is true, so that the decision maker will have more than one opinion on any of the main issues that he deals with. That's the DNA of the Israeli intelligence. We always have more opinions on everything. But in the end of the day, the opinion of the head of the research division is the one that you have to refer to. You can listen to many others. But this is the opinion that you have to listen to, and you have to take it into account when you decide on policy.
To close out, a couple of questions I'm seeing here that I'll kind of summarize into one is that you had mentioned before about sort of the Palestinians and as far as their narrative or their way of thinking does not have a place for us in that future, in that mindset. What would you say as far as preparing either Palestinians, but also Israelis for a future that includes Palestinians in a different capacity than we're currently experiencing each other?
Well, I think basically in Israel, we are preparing ourselves to that. We are peace. We speak about a lot about peace. Not everybody. We have some extremists that I'm less fond of, that have a different view. But most of the population in Israel is looking for an agreement with the Palestinians that would guarantee two things. One, that they will finally accept us as a nation state of the Jewish people, which means that they will have to accept that we are a people that have a right of self-determination somewhere here. It doesn't matter the borders, are less important once that happen. And the other thing that they would realize that we have genuine and right concerns about our security. That's, we've been attacked so many times and we are facing so many threats that we worry about our security. These are two things that we expect from the Palestinians to accept. And whether the Palestinians are going to do that, they, for the time being, make no preparation. I mean, I was, for example, head of the Syrian branch for a long while in the late 80s and early 90s, okay, long time ago. And Assad at the time was thinking about making peace with Israel. So every day, the three papers of Syria had rectangular on the front page quoting Assad about how important it is to make peace with Israel. There's nothing more beautiful than peace. Peace is the best thing that can happen to a human being. I didn't know that Assad said all of that, Hafiz, but they quoted him as saying it. He was making a big effort to prepare the public for peace. Eventually, we didn't have peace with him, but he was thinking about it and he was preparing the public for that. In the Palestinian Authority, just the opposite is happening all the time. And I don't want to repeat what I said before. For the time being, the hate indoctrination is what's happening. You know, we have here in Israel an institute called Impact SE that looks at the textbooks and the teaching programs in schools all over the Middle East and beyond. And I just met with the head of it a couple of days ago. And also in our institution, we do the same. In the Center for the Information Center on Intelligence and Terrorism, we do the same. We also follow the books. Look at the paper we have issued on the changes in the last year in the textbooks. It just became worse. If there were some mentioning of the Oslo agreements or of peace or things like that, they were taken out. There's no effort on the Palestinian side to prepare the public to peace. On the other hand, there's a lot of effort going on hate indoctrination and so on and so forth. That's that we should be worried about, and I hope something is going to be done about it. According to the peace agreements that we had, the Oslo agreements we had with the Palestinians, they were supposed to stop it. There was supposed to be a committee to look at the incitement in the Palestinian Authority and make sure that it doesn't happen. It survived for a very short time, and ever since then, the Palestinians don't do anything in order to cope with that. And it's a big pity. I hope someday they will realize that they need to go this way, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, and as is the nature of the world, we got some things that are going well and we have to look forward to, and other things that we need to work on, and we'll have to wait for them to get better. General, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, expressing your background, your knowledge, your experience. It was insightful, certainly for Ron and myself, but I'm sure for all those who have been with us and are still with us. Just in closing, Igal has posted his contact information in the chat box to learn more about the IICC and certainly to be in contact with him about it. I fully encourage you to go to our website, fuelfortruth.org, to learn more about our programs and certainly how you can get more involved with us.